Chair. Hi, Dennis.
Roger. Good seeing you.
Okay, so today we got the expert.
You.
No, not me.
No,
As you
yo,
know,
sorry,
Brian has been sharpening. Brian's a pretty sharp guy. He's been sorry, Brian.
People in this room would question that, but anyway.
He's been sharpening for how many years, Brian?
All my life.
All your life.
4 weeks.
4 weeks. Yeah.
I finish a little faster than that.
Yeah. But in my opinion, this guy is the guru of sharpening, okay? And he's agreed to do a presentation for us on sharpening. So I can't remember what the title of the presentation is.
Oh, peak performance sharpening.
Peak performance sharpening, there you go.
Let me see if I can find it here now.
So if you don't want to throw out those old razor blades and stuff, I'll tell you how to sharpen them.
Okay. Thanks, Don.
You're welcome.
Just to answer the question, I've been sharpening since my 20s, and then I kind of got away from woodworking for a number of years and got back at it. Very frustrated with sharpening for a couple of reasons. I didn't know what sharp was. I didn't know what sharp could do. And I didn't have really good mentors or resources. This was the 1970s in St. John's. And so, anyway, make a long story short, I spent a long time being very frustrated until I decided to stop being frustrated and learn what sharpening was all about. What really turned me on to sort of what I call high-end sharpening is when I came to work here 18 years ago. And shortly thereafter, I did two things. One, I took over taking care of the tools for this room, which meant that some weeks, some afternoons, I sharpened 50 tools. And for a couple of years, I tracked how much I sharpened, and I sharpened between 500 and 700 items a year. And after I got at that for a little while, it sort of occurred to me that if this is going to work, it's got to be efficient. So it's got to be not just good, because you can take all afternoon to sharpen a chisel, or you can take 30 seconds, choose. But if you got a stack of 24 to do, I think I know which answer I want, right? Especially when somebody is clamoring at you, are they done yet? And when you know that the seminar is tomorrow morning, and tomorrow afternoon you're going to be sharpening the same tools all over again. So I learned to be fast, I learned to be good, and I learned to be, in general, very efficient. And the way I explain that to people, if you were to look at the sharpening setup I used to use here, with the sharpening setup I use at home, and the sharpening setup I would set up in this room if I was teaching, would be identical. Like where I lay things down is identical. Because I expect my square to be here. It's kind of, and I've ruled out shit that isn't efficient. But I'm kind of slightly jumping ahead here. And then I started teaching sharpening. And along the way, I stopped using honing guides because you can't be efficient and fast and use a honing guide. One of those three does not compute, okay? Because I don't have anything against honing guides, unless you're trying to be fast. And like the time you're screwing around with your honing guide, double checking that everything's square, I got 4 of the aforementioned chisels done. Okay? So it was a choice I made. Having made that choice, I then had to learn how to freehand hone consistently. Okay? So there's some really critical words I'm choosing here. And then I thought about the way I was teaching it. And Lee Valley wanted me to teach it with honing guides, and that's the way the guys who came before me taught it. And I wanted to introduce freehand honing because honing guides don't do everything. So I felt as though, well, you need to freehand hone anyway. You need to learn how to do it, but nobody's teaching it. Good luck finding an article on it. So I figured out how to teach it so that I could take somebody who had never picked up a tool before, show them my exact methodology, watch them carefully while they do it, and have them do it successfully, and Roger Chan will tell you that it works. So I proved a concept, if you will, right? So over the years, kind of things evolved and got fine-tuned. I revised my seminar quite a bit. I wrote some articles for a British magazine. I did a chapter for Norm's last book, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm going to do here today is three things. I'm going to go over quickly the basic concepts that I used to teach in my seminars, mainly for the benefit of those who've not taken one of my seminars. Anybody in here not taken one of my seminars? A few, okay, quite a few. All right. So
So
for those,
you have a refresher?
yeah, so Roger's getting a free refresher. So I'm gonna go over the basic ideas. I'm not gonna demonstrate anything. I'm not gonna try to teach it. I'm just gonna touch the way I used to do it. And then I'm gonna go over some strategies that I developed for eliminating frustration. So that's the first two chunks. Then I'm gonna introduce a new idea that I've been playing with for the last couple of years, and I haven't shown it to anybody yet. So you guys are gonna be the first folks to see this. And it's a way of visualizing the whole approach. And put yourself in the mind of a beginner sharpener. How many people here consider themselves to be good sharpeners? Oh, nobody's handed up. Oh, come on.
With a guide.
With a guide, I don't care, with a guide, without.
Occasional really.
Okay, okay, anybody here considers themselves to be not a sharpener or a very poor sharpener? Don't be too hard on yourselves. So some folks need some help, they think? Okay.
I'm
All right.
very good with the theory.
You're good with the theory. Okay, hopefully everybody will get something out of this. I know everybody will, because there's enough in this for okay, that's me. That's today. So that's essentially what I'm going to do. We're going to go over the essentials, 6 strategies, and then how to achieve what I call peak performance. My seminar presentations over the years and have all been kind of a similar vein, okay? Here we go. Introducing important concepts to beginners. The fundamentals of sharpening. What is a sharp edge? The intersection of two planes of steel to a zero radius. Okay, that's a theoretical definition of what sharp is. The fact that it's an essential gateway skill. Want to use hand tools? Sharpening is not a choice, right? And I also emphasize, well, what does that really mean? Well, if you were to go to a hand tool seminar at Rosewood Studio with, say, somebody like Garrett Hack, sharpening at a certain level is assumed, okay? Folks like him don't talk about sharpening. It's a boring topic. We all sharpen. We all sharpen at a really high level. Next. The only people who talk about sharpening are people who don't sharpen enough. Because once you sharpen enough and you get good at it, you don't need to talk about it anymore. Okay? So, I also demonstrate what sharp is all about. And we might as well get that process started here. This is my standard way what I generally do is, okay, here we go. Off the shelf. So there's 2 blades going to go around. Original. Okay, so this blade is off the shelf. It sort of pretends like it wants to be sharp someday when it grows up. Okay, but it's not sharp now. Not by my. So just pass it around. This one has been what I call fully honed. And I use Bester Imanishi stones, 700, 2000, 8000, followed by honing compound on a strop. And yes, it will. So be careful. The easiest way, especially for the squeamish, is on your fingernail like this. Okay, so and don't drop it or you'll be staying there.
What's the penalty if you don't?
You get to resharpen.
Yeah, go
Okay.
sharpen it, good luck.
So the other way, the other thing I go back to what I said earlier about what is my own frustrations. So one day a guy comes in the store and he's got some Jatoba, nasty shit, and he's having trouble planing it. So I have one of those days when it's better to be lucky than good looking. So I took a plane out of the workshop, I homed it, and I said, I told him what I was gonna do, and I brought the plane out, and on the workbench that used to be right here, I polished this piece of wood. Okay? And that was about 15 years ago. It's been wrapped up in that cloth ever since, so you can pass that around. The best way to do it is up to the light. And I can pass around a couple. That's a piece of cherry. And that's a piece of bird's eye maple. So for those who say you can't do bird's eye maple with hand plane perfectly, I call bullshit. Now, sharpening at this level, okay, takes work. It takes time, it takes a certain amount of dedication, and that's what feeds, that's kind of the backstory to what I'm going to talk about, okay? This is what is possible for those who are willing to put the time in. Okay, I would do these demos, and then I would have an array of sharpening media available to look at. The bottom line on sharpening media is they all work. Everything works. It's just that there are certain pros and cons, efficiencies, inefficiencies, some more expensive, some cheaper, some suitable for travel, some suitable to leave in your truck in winter in Canada. You know, there's all kinds of reasons. But the main thing is that all of the methods work. Okay, you don't need to go out if you're a beginner sharpener and buy a whole pile of the latest and the best and the most expensive sharpening stuff in order to, shall we say, keep up with the Joneses. Not necessary at all. I started out with king stones until we introduced the Bester and Minishis about 10 years ago. And I don't, to answer the next question, I don't own any Shapton. Probably never will. Because the finest grit that Shapton will take you to is, I think, about 0.02 microns finer than green honing compound. Okay? How long has green honing compound been around, and how cheap is it? Right? I bought a $15 or $20 lump of that 15 or 20 years ago, and I'm still working on it. So my point is obvious. You can work with what you've got incredibly effectively. It's not a question of going out and buying a new tool. It's a question of using the tools you already have more effectively. Yes, sir.
Okay. The green compound, my understanding is you do not put it on leather, you put it on some piece of maple, right?
That's what I do. So I use both,
Okay.
leather or a block of hardwood.
But because I'm no Brian Greene, so the piece of maple that I will prepare, how do I know like this is perfectly flat?
Just get a piece of maple and plane it flat.
So just sharpen,
But my blade is a
sharpen your blade.
Well, it's a question, I need to build a workbench, and therefore I need a workbench.
Brian, it has to be flat and square.
Has to be flat. No, it doesn't have to be square. It can be ugly on the back.
Just, sorry, Brian,
Yeah.
just to go back, you said 0.2 micron difference between the Shapton and the compound.
Between the finest Shapton, I'm going by memory, but the finest Shapton stone is like 0.4 something microns. And I think the green honing compound is nominally about 0.5.
Okay, and I'm not so ambidextrous, so convert that to grit, or can you, Lee?
No, it's microns.
Right, but
It doesn't, at that level, it doesn't convert to grit. It's up to around 15,000. Okay? So it's
greater than 50.
It's the most accurate way to gauge honing media is to look for how it's measured in microns, because the numbers are quite nominal. If you look at the descriptions of the stones, the water stones in the woodworking catalog, you will find, if memory serves, an 8,000 king. I forget, but there's one situation where I know what it is. The 8,000 Bester is it's 1 point, it's 0.9. I got it wrong. I need a catalog. I can't do this from memory. Anyway, it's finer than the 10,000 sigma. So in other words, the 8,000 number and the 10,000 number are irrelevant. They tell you absolutely nothing useful. So don't go by those numbers. And a number of years ago, we started publishing the data in microns, and that's what you should go by.
Question, Brian?
Yeah.
You hollow grind, or
Yes.
I notice everything's flat ground, you hollow grind?
I hollow
That
grind.
makes,
That's a choice I make, because there's four ways to shape an edge. There's the Japanese way, flat grind, no micro bevel. My Japanese sharpening guru friend tells me it's perfectly fine to put a micro bevel on it, so that's your second way. So if you are doing your grinding on a diamond stone, you are making a choice to do a flat grind, right? Or if you're using, say, the Mark II power sharpening system, you're making a choice to create a flat grind. Then your next choice is with or without a micro bevel. Okay, that's the first two shapes. The second shape is the old-fashioned way. Think big grindstone. Put your blade on it, and you create a hollow grind. Okay. Then your next choice is when you lay that on the stone. Obviously, the hollow is lifting the middle off the stone, so that only the tip and the tail of the blade are touching. So you hone. So you get the tip and the tail will get shiny, right? When they start to get too close together, you regrind. Okay, that's shape number 3. Shape number 4 is not popular, not common, but you lift slightly. So you only hone the tip of the blade, creating a smaller micro bevel at a slightly higher angle. Okay, that's shape number 4. So to go back to Norm's question, the shape you choose dictates your grinding apparatus, or your grinding apparatus dictates your shape.
well,
And that's your starting point.
I currently do flat grind,
Yes,
and I hone by hand.
right.
I'm wondering if there's a huge advantage. I
No.
could just switch to
I don't think
some
there's any
debating whether
advantage.
you invest in a Tormac or one
No.
of those slow speed Franklins.
I don't think there's any advantage.
It's a 2-point thing, you know. Doesn't
You can get a 2-point thing either way. Well, no, you can't get a 2-point thing with flat grind. You gotta go, you go up and you do a single point micro bevel. And the trick is, it doesn't matter what's happening at the heel of the blade. That's irrelevant to anything. It doesn't matter what's happening on the primary bevel. It doesn't touch the wood either. Only matters what's happening at the edge. So how you do that, right, is all that matters. And pick any one of those. Pick any three of those 4 methods, and you'll get a micro bevel, right? Okay, does that answer it? So in other words, just to repeat my point, on the heels of Norm's question, is work with the technology you have, because it works just fine. I assume you're getting perfectly fine edges right now.
I am, I was just wondering if it was, I'm shortchanging myself by not hollow grinding.
I don't think so. I've done it both ways. I'm just as comfortable using the Mark II power sharpener as I would be using my own 6-inch grinder at
I
home.
have a VL system, not
I have one of those too. Yeah, that'll give you a sharp, not as
Primary
accurate.
grind- Primary grind is.
Yeah, primary grind. Yeah. Which leads us to the next question. The importance of primary and
What
secondary.
is a primary grind?
Good thing you asked that question. I'm about to explain it. So, the primary bevel is this one. Okay? The secondary is this one. Okay, that little strip at the front. Here's the thing that people need to know that I learned in a sharpening class when I went over to a guy. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm honing." I said, "Can I see your blade?" And he hands me his blade. And his primary bevel, I could see my face in it. I said, "What'd you do that for?"
It's nice, it's all shiny.
I said, "That's very pretty." I said, utter waste of your time."
Still shiny.
I said, "Stop doing it." That's all that needs to be said about primary bevels. I use them right off the grinder. Okay? Because they do no work. So any work you do to it is a waste of your time. I only focus on the secondary bevel. And I learned that lesson from Rob Costner. Rob was at the wood show with his booth set up. And he was working for Lee Nielsen at the time. And I forget which of his many sharpening iterations he was at that point. But those who know. But Rob was, had his bench facing the crowd, and he had a little sharpening station set up here. And he said to the crowd, "I make money here. I don't make any money over here. The less time I spend here, the more time I can spend here." And I said to him after, I said, "That was friggin' brilliant." Woodworkers need to understand that, and that has stuck with me. And I tell the story in virtually every sharpening presentation I've ever done. It says what needs to be said about sharpening. You're not, if you, and to put it another way, on some forum some time ago, a guy asked a question along these lines, and one of the responses that came back was, "If the guy takes longer than 1.5 minutes to sharpen a chisel, I can't afford to hire him." Okay? So keep that thought in mind as we move on to something I'm going to talk about later on. So did I answer your question?
Yes, you have.
So, the importance of primary and secondary bevels. The secondary bevel has one purpose in life, or two. It's designed to make your sharpening faster, because you're grinding less metal. Okay? Better to be working with 0.5 millimeter of steel than, a couple of centimeters worth of steel. The second thing it can do on bevel up tools, or chisels that are used in a bevel up fashion, like chisels, or the bevel block planes, bevel up planes, is that you can change your bevel angle really quickly. So I learned that lesson from Vic Tesson. He says, "Why buy 50-degree blade? Take your 25-degree blade, put a 50-degree micro bevel on it. Same thing. And then when you don't need a 50-degree bevel anymore, go to the grinder and restore the 25 degrees. Next day you can put it at 38 if you want, or 42.5, whatever floats your boat. But if you're starting off with a 50-degree blade, it's hard to come down to 25. Right? So in other words, it reinforces the notion that all of the action is at the micro bevel. Right? It's the only place that it matters. What's going on? You can paint pretty pictures on the primary bevel if you want. I don't care. It does no work. It doesn't touch the wood. Wood doesn't give it.
Is the secondary bevel the same as micro bevel?
Yes. Sorry, I may use the terms
Okay.
interchangeably.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so then I would talk about the critical steps. Grinding the shape, right? That could result from you've just dropped it on the floor and nicked it. You want to put a camber on it, whatever you want to do. Honing the micro bevel, and the final step, which is polishing. Yes, Shelton?
Like the primary bevel, you would go to what, like 1,000 grit?
Off the
or-
grinder,
But say you don't want to use the grinder, 1,000?
off the diamond stone.
Okay, okay.
It doesn't get, it never touches my water stone.
No, I know, but then to some extent, we don't even need to have a primary.
Yes, you
level.
do, you gotta, it establishes the
Because you want it to be
basic shape.
smoother.
Huh?
You want it to be smoother than.
No, what for?
Well, because the secondary bevel would then get there faster, wouldn't it?
No.
If you don't have a primary, are you gonna hang your secondary off of?
I know, but you could just use the one that came from the stove.
Right, but then you're
Right, exactly.
honing the entire edge again, as opposed to half a millimeter.
Just use the top corner.
Trying to find a blank piece of paper here.
So much for
Just use the top.
What's that?
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So here's a blade. Okay? Get a different color. Micro bevel.
Yes,
Slightly higher angle.
yes.
How high? Doesn't matter, but however high you want. 1 degree, 5 degrees. Generally speaking, we say between, if you put a gun to my head, I'll say between 1 and 5 degrees. I freehand sharpen, so I never know, nor do I care. This would be the hollow grind. Right? So what happens between here and here, I don't care.
Brian, so you
Chip
could
at
buy,
it with a knife, chip at it with a rock if you want.
you could buy a blade from Wee Valley and not touch the primary bevel.
For years.
Okay, I got it.
Except when your micro bevel starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Right? So, you know, because every time you hone it, it's going to get a little bit shorter. At a certain point, having the micro bevel becomes counterproductive. It ceases to offer the benefit that it's designed to offer. So what you will do is you will regrind your blade and cut it back. But again, it's a few seconds work on whatever you use to grind, a few seconds work if you're using a power grinder, and a few minutes work if you're using a diamond stone, to take that primary bevel back to give yourself a fresh, shall we say, front end.
I find a power grinder, I don't trust myself to have a perfect 90 degrees though. Or is it, it's easy or?
Okay, you're introducing a couple of interesting ideas there. First of all, if you don't trust yourself, I get that. I was scared to death of them the first few times I used them. You kind of just got to do it enough to get over that. The second thing is don't use the word perfect and grinder in the same sentence. Roger.
The trick is you go to Home Hardware
Yes.
and you get the cheapest chisel you can get.
Yeah.
And then you practice and you grind it down until that 3 inches becomes 1 inch. And then you become comfortable with it.
And if you don't, you probably should stop woodworking.
One of the things that I want to just interject here is that there's a learning process that Brian's talking about that has been acquired over a tremendous number of years, and there's a tremendous amount of experience there. A lot of us struggle to the point where I will freehand sharpen, but at some point in time I've screwed it up so badly that I have to go back to my honing guide,
Right.
right? And I keep on trying to get faster and better, but I'm never going to reach the point where I will always freehand sharpen.
Okay.
Okay? It's just not.
No,
I
but
can't
you're making a
invest
good
that
point.
time. Okay?
The point is simple. If you want to learn, you have to do. And if you want to do better, you have to do more. right? So it's practice.
Brian, you made a casual comment there, which I don't know how you do it. You said with a honing guide in stone, you could reestablish your primary in a few minutes. Well, I dropped my blade and it's got like a millimeter nick, and it's like
Oh, that's
an
different.
hour and a half.
That's a different issue. Now, what you need to do, if people could visualize this grinder here, you need to put your grinder rest. This is where having a power grinder and getting comfortable using it is a tremendous advantage. Put your grinder at 90 degrees
Right.
and stick the blade in there
Yep.
and grind off the damage.
Right.
And then go to your primary bevel angle and reshape your primary. If you gotta do that by hand, that's why I bought a power grinder. But it's also why I didn't buy an expensive power grinder, because that's the level of sophistication my power grinder does. I'm not doing fine work at it, right? So I don't need I happen to have a slow speed grinder, right? Because I bought one secondhand with a white Norton wheel on it. But you could do just as nicely with a six. You could probably get away with a 6/8, the wheel that it comes with, doing that kind of work as long as you're super careful. You could do it on the sander grinder we sell. But if you got to do it on a stone, then what you want is a diamond stone.
Yeah, that's why I was working in 300.
Because I tried this for years with a 1,000 grit King Waterstone, and that gets really old really quickly. Yeah.
Hey, Brian,
Okay.
Brian,
Yes.
you tend to focus a lot on the micro bevel, secondary bevel, so when you're grinding a secondary bevel by hand, freehand,
Yeah.
is it critical for you to maintain that same angle, the micro bevel?
The same angle as when? Yesterday or
The
now?
last time you
I don't care about what I did yesterday.
to eliminate facets.
But here's a theory for you. Now, tell me if this works for you. I'm 6'2", bench is whatever it is. My hands have been doing this for 40 years, not for 40 years, but for 20 years. And I suspect that this angle is more or less the same pretty much all the time. And I can tell you, I know this to be true, because when we brought out PMV 11, I was involved in the testing. And the guys down the street knew that I freehand honed. So they would have me do a bunch of blades. I did a bunch of blades one day, which they were intending to send to England because we were debating the question of whether PMV 11 could actually be made sharper than 01. So I sharpened a bunch of blades. One of the engineers called me and said, "Brian, come down." So I went down, and he had some blades set up, and he set one up under the microscope. And he says, "Look at that edge." So I looked at the edge. I said, "What am I looking at?" He said, "Look, that's the edge you sharpened for us." And he said, "Guess what?" He said, "All 15 of them are the same."
Secondary bevel.
Secondary bevel. All 15 were the same.
Yeah, you
Practice.
developed,
Practice. Hand-to-eye coordination. And not thinking about it too much. Not measuring anything.
What's the final grit that you would put on your secondary bevel? My highest stone's a 4,000 right now.
Okay, 4,000 watt.
4,000, I bought a Shapton Waterstone.
Okay. I don't know what the microns are, but I go to 8,000, and it's
Okay.
about a 0.9 or a 1 micron stone, and then I use the half micron honing compound on a strop.
Okay,
So the blade that was going around the room, I don't know if it got over to you.
it didn't, but that's okay.
Okay, that blade is,
That's
that's the sharp one, right, the other one? So just do this. This is an off-the-shelf blade, and this one is sharpened the way I do them. So you
And
can
that's
tell the
still
difference.
8,000?
That's 8,000, followed by the green honing compound. That's important.
I have no.
Because that takes it from sharp to being stupid sharp. Okay?
Diamond paste?
Diamond paste is also excellent, but I routinely use the, okay, so those are the critical steps. I probably said this already. Okay, yeah, okay. Here's the thing. The last point is the important point. Doesn't matter what I do. I sharpen more than any mere mortal, and that's okay. I don't do as much anymore as I used to when I took care of the tools. I developed a muscle memory that's truly scary. But the point I always made in my seminars was simple. If you don't sharpen much, or if you're a beginner, I think getting results is what's more important. Technique, I don't give a shit about. Right? And people come at this in different ways. Some people are game enough and they want to try the freehand. Okay? Go for it. I would never discourage it. Some people, confidence, not quite the same, or their need to get perfection is different, their need for perceived notions of repeatability and consistency is different. Honing guide. If you only sharpen one blade a month, that's different than doing 10 a day. So use a honing guide. That's my take on. People think I'm against honing guides, but I'm not.
When it's dull, I'll use a honing glide up to about 10,000.
When it's dull.
When it's dull.
We're going to have a chat about that
But-
too.
But when I'm working, and I think it
Yeah.
needs to be touched up because it's not giving me what I want,
Okay.
I will freehand it on green compound
Perfect.
and leather,
Good. Okay.
rather than going through
You
all
saved
the-
yourself with the
all
second
the
part.
BS of going through the honing guide again.
Okay.
So you can do both, right?
Yeah. No.
You
You
go
can do. You
directly
can
to
definitely do
bring that
both.
on?
Yeah, well, if I'm just touching it up, I
Yeah.
already got it to 10 and it's a little dull, I'll touch it off.
Okay.
Yes. Exactly. But I'm going to say it here in a few minutes. So I won't preempt myself. So one of the things I stressed, if you haven't picked it up by now, is efficiency. Okay, and I figured out that an efficient sharpening system has 4 parts. It has to be effective, because if it's not effective, what's the point? For me, it had to be fast. For somebody who's sharpening a volume of tools, you need to take Robbie Kostman's advice to heart. Especially if you're a professional woodworker. If you're an amateur woodworker and you're doing two items a month, it doesn't matter. Speed's not a relevant issue for you. It needs to be convenient, because if it's not convenient, that means it's inconvenient, and if it's inconvenient, you're not going to want to do it. Okay? And consistency in woodworking is everything. It doesn't matter if you're sharpening or cutting dovetails or sawing a board in two. Consistency of technique, methodology, is what develops the muscle memory, the hand-eye coordination. That's how we learn woodworking, is by doing things consistently, all right? And we need to be able to develop the ability, and this is important to the learning notion that Roger mentioned, being able to unpack what we're doing and diagnose it and make the micro adjustments is why we say pick a system and stick with it long enough to understand its nuances. Because you're flicking around, and every time Shapton brings out a new stone, you're in buying it, you're not going to learn a bloody thing. It's as simple as that. Because you're not going to be consistent in either the methodology or the approach to it. Hey, Charles. So, to be truly efficient, that is to say, combination of speed and effectiveness, all 4 conditions must be met.
How often do you go back to I know you polish the back of the blade, how often do you readdress that polish?
I lap my burr off
Right.
at every step.
Every step.
So the back of the blade is being continuously lapped. Okay?
How
But
often do
you
you
always-
true your stones?
Oh, every 3 to 5 minutes of use.
For the stones?
That's cardinal sin number 1 that I've experienced talking to customers over the years, is how often do you lap your stones? Lap my stones. I lapped them last month. No, that doesn't cut it. Water stones work efficiently, right? Because they quickly abrade and cast off their worn particles and give you new particles, sharp particles. That's why they're fast. But if you're constantly wearing on the stone, you're constantly knocking it out of true. Jocelyn.
So the piece, the section underneath the chisel, okay, that you remove the burr after each stone.
The burr. You know what the burr is?
Yes, the burr, yes. Do you do it strictly on your smallest, like the
My
stone?
finest stone, yes.
Finest, always, you remove
That's
the
all it ever
burr,
touches the back.
always on the finest stone, not on the grain counter?
No, I take the burr off on the fine stone,
Okay,
and then when I'm done, I will lap the back, I will polish the back as well on the
So you remove the burr in your case, on your 8,000 grit stone.
Exactly. So speed, effectiveness, convenience, and consistency. I just drew this diagram to kind of make it relatable. Okay, 6 strategies to improve your sharpening. Okay, first one, change your attitude. Let's cut right to the chase here.
Sharpening sucks.
Sharpening sucks, you see what I mean? Okay, we have a winner. Take it seriously, you gotta show up and put in the time. Okay, we're talking about people who wanna be good sharpeners, because they wanna use hand tools, and they wanna use hand tools effectively. So this is the cut to the chase part of the program. The tools won't sharpen themselves. When to sharpen? Don't wait till they're dull.
Well, when they don't perform according to what you think they should perform at.
You took my seminar one time, I know you did, I know you did.
But if you don't know from sharp, then how do you know?
Well, now you know what sharp is. Don't wait till they get dull, okay? Sharp, don't think in terms of dullness. A dull tool has been useless for some time. It just took you a while to catch up to the reality, decide to throw in the towel.
Which one's
All right.
taller?
It's a bit like the alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. Right? It's dull. Don't wait. Sharpen when you know you can make it better.
Yeah, you said like 3 to 5 minutes or 5 to 8 minutes on the water stones. Do you have like a frame of reference for how many minutes of work a blade will get, depending on what you're doing?
No.
Okay.
There's a couple of ways of thinking about lapping your water stones.
Mm-hmm.
If you're thinking about it, do it. Okay? Another way is if you do a lot of sharpening, do them every 3 or 4 or 5 blades, especially if you're doing a bunch of narrow stuff. The other way to think about it is if you've got a bunch of stuff to do the wide stuff, then the skinny stuff. Then lap the stones and put them away so they're fresh for the next time. In other words, it's a bit of a judgment call.
Sure.
Okay? And also learn to use the stone efficiently so that you're reducing the likelihood of knocking it out of flat. But the bottom line is water stones are susceptible to coming unflat quite easily compared to oil stones. If you use diamond stones, this is not an issue. Okay, embrace sharpening. It's the gateway skill. That's my... Number 2, visualize. Okay, understand what sharp is, understand what a sharp tool can do. What kind of, oh, we did that already too. And understand this point, that not every tool needs to be sharpened to the same degree. Roger, if you invite me over to your place next weekend to help you with a deck, I'm going to bring my beater chisels. Simple. And they're not sharpened to the same degree as the chisels that never leave the shop. Simple as that. In other words, not every tool needs to be sharpened to some infinitesimal degree. It's just not practical. My son is a carpenter, and his need for sharpening can be accomplished with a belt sander.
The Forsberg method.
Figure out his method with the scraper on the belt sander does actually work.
I tried it and yet.
So figure out what the tool needs to do and sharpen it appropriately. Now I'm not saying don't play with the ideas. Don't use sharpening as good practice time. I sharpen everything at the same level because it's fast. It's easy for me to do. Okay? But what I'm saying is that you don't have to. Right?
Understanding what sharp is.
Understanding what sharp is.
It's something that I always remember it took me 2 to 3 weeks in Perth to understand what sharp was.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking I knew. And then finally,
and if anybody looks at that sharp blade over there, they can see it. Getting that even, nice, glinty look
Yeah.
is really hard because people don't, like, when you're doing it, you may not even get that for a long time because you're not doing the right angle or whatever.
Where are the blades?
Over here. It's just something that everybody, if anybody's here that has not done this very much,
So you're talking about
You
my,
have to get-
this
yeah.
my fine micro bevel. Let's
Yeah.
pass this blade around the room again. And look at the primary bevel this time. Well, look at two things. Look at the primary. And what you'll see are the grinder marks. Okay? And then look at the micro bevel. And if you look at it, if you sort of flick it back and forth in the light, you will see the original micro bevel. And you will see the new micro bevel that's about half its size and a slightly higher angle. Okay? To Wayne's point.
But you get to a point of diminishing returns, and you should stop at some point.
Well, yeah, there's a point when
You're
the,
making furniture, you're not spending days.
well, you're not sharpening a scalpel to take out, to do open heart surgery on a baby. I mean, come on, there's a limit to that. Brian?
When you sharpen on a grinder, that edge is really rough.
Yes.
So you go through multiple grits to get your micro bevel.
I don't do micro bevels at the grinder.
No. To get the edge, once it comes off the grinder.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta go through multiple
Oh, yeah,
grits.
yeah.
Otherwise you work.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that goes without saying. I use Bestre and Minishi water stones, and I use the 700, the 2000, and the 8000. I start at the 7, and I get a burr. Consistent burr across the back.
Do you ever camber your edge around your
Yes.
edges? Yeah.
And this, if you feel this one has been sharpened too on a 1000 grit stone of some sort, and you can feel the burr on the back. So do this. Don't do it a lot because you'll rub the burr off, and the person in the back row won't get to see it. So yes, at the 700 stone, the coarse stone, I will hone it until I get a burr consistent from corner to corner that I think is appropriate for that grit. I can't teach that. You just have to say, well, that's not big enough yet. So I hone it off on the back, I lap it off, and then I go to the 2000 stone. I do the exact same thing. And I lap it off on the 8000 stone. And the reason why I lap it off after each one, despite what some articles on sharpening suggest, and they're wrong, they say wait till the end, bullshit. If you wait till the end, the burr serves you no purpose at the intermediate stages.
That was gonna be
The
my
burr
question.
is your indicator that this edge has met this edge. And the metal has gotten so thin that it bends back and forms a burr. That's what you're looking for. And yes, to Norman's point, that yes, if you take one single stroke more, you're into the land of diminishing returns. A bigger micro bevel is not a sharper micro bevel. It's just a bigger micro bevel.
So could you just say again, you remove the back burr on the next higher stone?
No, on my highest stone.
So each, okay,
At
so
each time.
if I do my 1000, I got a burr, you'll go to your 12,000 to remove the burr?
In my case, 8000.
Or 8,000, then
Yes.
you go to the 4, and then you go back up to the 8,000?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. So the only thing that touches the back of your blade is your finest sharpening media. Okay? Okay. Visualizing, very important. Understanding fundamentals. You gotta know what you're doing. Understand. I don't want to repeat things. Don't fret irrelevant details. Okay. One of those irrelevant details is sending an email to customer service that says, doesn't matter what I do, I get 89 degrees. I want to say, my first response
Well done.
is I want to say, okay, what's your point?
That's a lot of grinding.
Okay, and this is going to become relevant in a couple of minutes, okay? But the point I want to make here is really simple. You know that skew adjustment they put on planes? They put it there for a reason. And it'll cover about a 5-degree range. So you're even remotely in the ballpark of a square edge, you're good to go. Don't think I've ever encountered a situation where a perfectly square edge on a chisel was critical to the work I was doing. I can't think of a scenario. If somebody wants to point me to one, okay, very fine dovetails. All right, I'll let you have that one. Or maybe some fine inlay work, where you're going to be using the side of the chisel up against something and whatever. But I can get that. But 95% of the time, you don't need a square tool.
Might actually improve the performance. Might actually improve the performance too.
Well, here's where we're going to go with this. Just hang on to that thought. There are certain tools now that do function better when they have square edges. Shoulder planes, for example. Okay, so you got to sweat that one. But Norm raises an interesting point. You see, if you're not spending time trying to perfect the unperfectible, or the thing that's unnecessary, you're spending an unnecessarily long amount of time on what I consider to be an irrelevant detail. That's not time you're spent cutting dovetails. That's not time you know what I mean? So your productivity is affected in some fashion, and I don't think you're learning it. Covered the last point.
Do you consider square for a router plane, a hand router plane, important?
Not really. I think it's overrated notion. And if you took away that overrated notion from the woodworking discussion forums, I don't know if most of them have anything to talk about. Hey.
So to elaborate a little bit on truing the stone itself, presumably you need a nice flat reference surface and
yes,
something like sandpaper or some such.
Yes, okay.
To do that.
There's a number of ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
My least favorite way of doing it is with a so-called truing stone. I haven't seen one yet that stays true, in which case it needs to be trued. So how I true stones is with a diamond. I now use a diamond stone. I have a 140 DMT or whatever. And I do my 700 on the diamond stone. I do my 2000 on the 700 because it's now flat. And by using the finer grit, I take less material off the medium stone. And then I do my fine stone on the medium stone. And I do all the faces, and I turn the stone repeatedly to make sure I'm being even. So that's my ritual. Another alternative is drywall screen on a piece of plate glass on a piece of good plywood. That was my method for years, and it was the method that folks in my seminars used. So a piece of Norton 120 drywall screen on a piece of plate glass, and have the plate glass on a substantial piece of like MDF or particle board of some kind, something that's dead nuts flat, because you can't trust bench tops to be flat, and the glass can be pressed out of flat.
Well, thanks to Lee Valley, I have that granite slab. So.
Perfect. That's what I have one of those as well, and you can put your Norton drywall screen right, or a piece of coarse sandpaper right on the granite slab.
Sweet.
Okay.
At one point in time, Busy Bee was selling a granite slab. It was about like this.
Yeah.
It was like that.
That's what I have.
That's what
So I had
wound
it,
up with.
and then I decided that it's also going to be good for a headstone. So
When the time comes.
I could probably put my name on it. It's heavy enough. So yeah, multi-purpose. There we go. Sweet.
Okay, I'm big on managing expectations. We just talked about square edges. I get asked a lot about old tools. This is just a random collection of stuff I didn't know where else it fit. Old tools are good. I've refurbished my share. They seldom work as good as new premium tools, but they can usually be made to work better than sort of second-rate new tools. I'd take an old Stanley over a new Stanley any day, in other words. Okay? Only you can judge. I put it in here because not everybody has the same budget for tools. And so the corollary to this is spend your new tool money on a good premium smoother. And spend the rest of your budget on some, like a Stanley Jack plane. I'm still using mine.
But the old
A
tool,
Stanley,
the
a
blade is
Stanley
thin.
number seven.
The blade is thin on the old tool.
So replace it. It's still, so replace it. It's still cheaper than a new blade. Well, what, the point I'm making here is that put your money where you're gonna get the most bang for your buck. And the bevel up smoother that we sell is what produced those shiny surfaces. There is no smoother that you can buy that's gonna do better work, unless you wanna spend several $1,000s and go have a chat with Mr. Sauer. Right? What's a smoother? A smoother is typically a 4 or 4.5 size plane that is dedicated to that purpose. You might have a couple of planes in that size range, but you might reserve one of them for doing just that critical work. And it will be tuned and sharpened to within an inch of its life. Technique always trumps technology. So a better stone is not going to make you a better sharpener. More practice time, however, will. Okay?
There are a few nuances there though, Brian. For
Yes.
example, I don't know if he's still here. Anyways, you're there. He strops off green compound with leather. I use green compound on hard maple.
All right.
The reason why I went to hard maple was because I didn't have the skill. Every time I'd use that bloody leather and I was stropping away, I'd cut it.
Yeah, okay.
So I went to the hard maple.
And you've
When
seen me do it with the hard maple.
And then when I dug it in,
Yeah.
I just take the plane and plane it
Plane it
on.
off.
So,
Yeah.
But I thought with the green things, you just go backwards,
Yeah,
you never push
with
forward.
the strop, you're supposed to just pull, not
yeah,
push.
well, good luck with that.
I've got my leather on a chunk of wood.
What's that?
Yeah.
I got my leather on a chunk of wood,
That works too.
and I just put it in the vise and I just
That's what I do.
pull the chisel back.
I have a
Don't go
couple
forwards.
I have a couple of honing compounds, and I experiment with them all the time, just because it's just me.
Sorry, Roger,
Huh?
when you gouge out your chunk of maple, are you planing it smooth with the blade you just sharpened?
I'm not telling. The answer is yes.
To extricate Roger from the hook you tried to impale him upon, Charles, there's another way you can flatten the maple, all right? And that's put some sandpaper on top of your table saw or jointer table or a piece of glass and sand it smooth. Now you want to be careful. The smart characters in the room will say, well, what about the sand that's been embedded in the surface? That may be an issue. I'm not going to deny that. So after that, I would scrape it, perhaps. So if you don't have a plane and don't trust your skills to create a strop, that would be, I think, a decent way of doing it. Norm or Brian or anybody else disagree? Okay. Yeah, so you could sand it because you got your flat reference surface at the top of your table saw or whatever, and sand it to whatever, probably 180 or 220 would be adequate, and then scrape it, like a couple of pulls on with a cabinet scraper should take the grit out.
They're really fastidious and clean it with alcohol.
You could do that too, yeah. You could also take a piece of the mylar we sell and lay that on top. That would work too.
I was gonna ask about the tabletop places, right? They sell secondhand granite. You know,
Yep.
the stuff that doesn't work for them or got broken or cracked or whatever.
Perfect.
Real cheap, right? You can get
Perfect.
flat pieces of granite really cheap.
So technique trumps technology. I think that sort of speaks for itself. Grinders defeat, my point with power grinders is they defeat the frustration of shaping, fixing, doing your basic grinding work. It's probably the single most important thing I ever did for my sharpening in terms of bang for the buck, in terms of saving me time. And then I got, once you sort of kind of get over your initial fears of it, right, and develop and do the cheap chisel thing that Roger was talking about and destroy some steel, you kind of develop a touch. And that's the trick to using grinders. You just have to develop a touch, and there's no other way to do it except by doing it. You can't learn it. You can't, sorry, you can't be taught it. You have to kind of just do it.
What's your opinion of the Tormek system? Because I can understand, from what I understand, you can do everything on the Tormek micro bevel.
My problem with the Tormek system is the cost, and that is jig focused. And it takes out the intuition. Well, one of the things, the unspoken benefits, in my opinion, for freehand honing is that it's very intuitive. I'm more in tune with the edge when I'm freehand honing than I am if I'm using a Tormek or something.
I use a grinder, but I do a lot of turning.
Yeah, that's
And
different.
It's a different thing.
It's a
So
different
you need-
thing.
You need a grinder if you're
Yeah,
turning.
yeah. That's the only efficient way.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, I think, I find diamond stones, I got turned on to diamond stones a number of years ago. They're less intimidating than a power grinder, for those who feel that way, and I totally relate to that. They have a certain amount of versatility that you can do things with a diamond stone you can't do with a power grinder. And to go back to so your nicked edge, oh, here it is. So on a diamond stone, instead of going in 90 degrees with the power grinder, you want to fix the nick, just hold it 90 degrees on the diamond stone and do some figure eights and flatten the front edge that way. You can also use them for lapping your water stones.
Oh, for the diamond stone.
So you can grind and you can lap with a diamond stone. So I'm finding I prefer it.
The diamond stones, though, are they always flat? Are they always good, or they get worn out after a while?
They will wear out after a while, but most amateurs won't wear one out.
Okay.
If you're a pro and you're sharpening every day, yeah, you will wear one out. Don't ask me how long it will take, because nobody knows.
Yeah,
It's going to depend on how much you're using it, but there's only so much diamond material on it, and it's going to disappear.
You have different grits?
Yes, they go from about 120 up to about 8,000.
So you could do everything with diamond stones. So.
You could, absolutely. I tend to talk about water stones because that's what I use, but almost everything applies also to diamond stones.
After you gave a very similar seminar at the Tool Crib or whatever last year sometime,
Yeah.
and there you advised me to get some, I was going 300, 1,000, and then honing at 17. You said that was too big a jump.
I think it is.
Yeah, so I came here and I bought an 8,000 diamond stone. But I can get a polished edge with my 1,000, but when I go to the 8,000, I just can't polish with that. Then I flip to an 8,000 stone and the polish comes out.
Different. I don't understand that either, and I even asked the question of the folks at Veritas, because I work there now. And by the time they were done answering the question, I was just as confused as before. So I don't think people understand fully the way, and maybe engineers can figure this out, but different kinds of metals respond to different kinds of lapping and polishing techniques and technologies, different ways, and you get a different finish. It's not that it's not flat, it's just that it's not polished. Now I know we've all been taught that polish is an indicator of flatness, but apparently not.
Oh, that's news.
So, there you go. The engineers measure flatness. They don't measure reflected light.
Interesting.
They don't care about the reflected light. I never hear it talked about. They talk about flatness, in the ways engineers express it.
Using a laser across the flat.
I suppose. I don't know. I don't know.
Can I add one little thing about water stones? If anybody like me has an unheated workshop, don't leave your stones in water in the shop. Don't ask me how I know this. But what I have found is that what does work is putting them in a cabinet with just like a 90-watt light bulb, just to keep it warm so it doesn't do that.
Yeah. I have a tub and across the tub is a stick. And I just take the stones out of the water, lay them across the edge of the pond, the stone pond, and the stick, and let them dry out. And the water freezes, it freezes. It has lots of places to go, so. But I let my stones dry out.
Yeah.
Now my boss, who wrote a book on sharpening, Richard Weil, contends, I disagree with him, but he contends, it's his shtick, that he doesn't like water stones left in water because he thinks it deteriorates them.
Really?
Yep. So unless you're using your stones every day, the conservative approach would be don't. I don't use my stones every day, and in the summertime, I tend to take them out, but only that's mainly because I don't forget. But in the summertime, I don't care. And I've never seen a stone deteriorate from being submerged in water. However, I don't put my 8,000 in there. It's never submerged in water.
Yeah.
I only ever spritz it.
You don't have to soak it?
I don't mind it.
Can you comment at all on the different types of metal and their durability or ability to retain an edge? Because what I've generally found is I have a bunch of chisels, but there are some chisels I always reach for because they hold an edge longer. Like,
Okay.
or like I have 3 or 4 block planes, but the block plane, I think it used to be called the rocket ship. The really nice shiny Veritas block
The
plane.
DX.
That's
yeah.
it.
Or the
Like,
NX.
Yeah, the blade in that, it's unbelievable. It's head and shoulders above.
Is it,
all the
I
other
assume it's a PMB 11.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. And it is considerably, like, it holds its edge longer, it takes a finer cut. And so.
It takes a finer cut.
Well, I'm able to get, how would I put this? I can get a more consistent result with it, but that's probably because it holds an edge longer.
Okay. Yes. So let me be brief about this, because I'm not one of those folks who's enamored of edge retention.
Okay.
I would take a sharp edge and touch it up more often and know what I have than depend on the steel to maintain it. I mean, I just don't. Now, I have some PMB 11 blades. I don't like A2 for different reasons, but I still favor 01. Now, I'll say this, there are circumstances where I think PMB 11 does outshine 01. And it's not because you can make it sharper, because I don't believe you can. I think that if you're working in abrasive woods, like mahoganies and the rosewoods, probably some others that have silica in them, right? Then you're going to find that the PMB 11 blade is your friend, because it's not going to wear out. You're not going to lose your edge as rapidly. But I fall, so yes, if you've got a lot of planing to do, smooth planing especially, you're probably going to like PMB 11 because you'll have to sharpen less. If I had a bunch of bird's eye maple to do, then I would probably choose a PMB 11 blade, right? And because the edge, you'll keep your edge longer, and that's critical with bird's eye maple. If you turn your back on bird's eye maple, it's going to bite.
What about the difficulty of sharpening?
It's more difficult, it's slightly more difficult to sharpen, but having PMB 11, but if we did a blind test here and I could disguise the blade sufficiently, you probably would not know the difference. But if I snuck an A2 blade in there, you'd say, whoops, you're trying to trick me. So I've proven that to myself. 01, PMB 11, not a lot of difference in the sharpening ability. A2 can take half as long again, and it's difficult to get a really good edge on it. It doesn't sharpen as fine as 01 or PMB 11.
So
Okay.
you said somewhere that you preferred 01?
I favor 01. I prefer it because I'm a sharpener, and it's easier to sharpen, and I believe it takes a better edge, even than PMB 11. But I think the official word on the subject is that it's PMB 11 is at least as good as 01. They won't say it's better. I don't think they can, and I don't think they can I don't think it's ever been evaluated. We had to send blades to England, and it came back, and a testing facility that we sent blades to over there was inconclusive. That's, if I recall correctly. It's been a while. So it's in other words, it's very, very close. So I'll stick with my belief that I think I can make an 01 blade better than a PMB 11 blade. Okay. I've said a few things here already, so I won't bore you with this, except to emphasize that learn to freehand. You need it for some tools. Although Veritas has gotten clever, and we've got a few new honing guide contraptions out there now that there's not much left on the list of things that must be freehand honed. Okay? But again, if you sharpen a lot, okay, you will find honing guides will slow you down, in my humble opinion.
Brian?
Yep.
Do you have any thought on the so-called micro bevel underneath?
The
You
back
know that-
bevel.
the
Back
Ellsworth?
bevel. I never use them.
But is it heresy or it's?
No, definitely not heresy. It's a time-honored technique. Especially, but relevant only to bevel down blades. Right? Think about the, if you think about the blade geometry, right? Do you use them, Norm? You use bevel down planes more than anything.
More than bevel.
Yeah. Do you use back bevels?
No.
Never.
I'm against that, polish back, because it messes up your primary
Yeah.
and secondary bevel.
Here's another thing that I've discovered, that if I want a better edge, I stop and make it so. We talked about technique trumping technology, so this kind of falls under that thing. If you think you can make the edge better, stop and do it. Right? And I think a back bevel is one way of doing that, but a back bevel is kind of throwing in a technological curveball because it's changing the blade geometry. But if you make the, see, I've also shown that I use, over the years, I've started to use 50-degree blades way less.
Okay.
Why is that, you might say? Because I can get more out of a 25 or a 38 in my bevel up smoother. Whereas 10 or 15 years ago, I needed the advantage that the higher angle gave me. But now I'm finding that I can sharpen well enough to overcome the challenge that the 50-degree blade is meant to overcome. So this is just an evolution. Now there are times, and you've got to make a judgment call. In bird's eye maple, believe me, I'm reaching for the 50-degree
So
blade.
you can plain bird's eye maple on a 25.
No, the
38?
piece of wood I passed around here was done with a 50-degree blade.
50. Okay.
Oh yes.
That's this one?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
No.
So this is, I'm watching the clock here, and I'm going to move along a little bit. So number 6 on the ways to make yourself a better sharpener. Practice. Regular practice develops the fine motor skills, okay? That's the critical bit. And it also fine-tunes your awareness of what's going on. Sharpen more, and you will sharpen less. That is to say, sharpen more often, but most of your sharpening is now going to be focused on the fine stone and the micro bevel. Don't wait for the tool to get dull, because now you're just doing work that you can teach an 8-year-old to do until you get to that critical point. Now what you're trying to do is, well, I wonder, can I make this better than I did yesterday by doing this? You know, a slight change in my hand position, or the number of strokes you take, or, you know, something, some variation on the theme. Because you're in the groove, and you're in tune with what's going on at that edge. I've said it so many times today, I've forgotten, but we've got to put in the time, sharpen often, evaluate what's happening, and make those fine adjustments. What I'm really saying is here is sharpening needs to become second nature. Okay? You get to the point where you can sharpen a blade in your sleep. And this is one of the reasons why I urge people who are at the point where they want to take the next step is take the contraption factor out of the picture. put the honing guide down and learn to freehand hone. And your life will get simpler. Your edges won't get better. You just may have more fun doing it. Okay, now, this is the bonus one. Don't overhone. So in other words, back to, I think it was Norman who asked the question about at a certain point, you're into the land of diminishing returns. Be very aware of what the burr is doing at all stages. That is your telltale, okay? A sailor learns to look at the telltales to know what the wind is doing relative to the sail. And you can fine-tune things significantly. But there's only so sharp that a grit of a certain size can make an edge. And when it peels back that burr, the wire edge, as my scoutmaster used to call it, you're done. Don't take a single extra stroke. Here's the other thing it does, in addition to killing your efficiency, you risk inaccuracy. So I once sharpened the blade, I think in 18 strokes? No, 9 strokes. 9 strokes on 3 stones. So let's say 2 strokes on a coarse stone and a few strokes on a medium stone, checking for a burr at every stroke, and then finishing off on a fine stone. And I think it was a total of 9. If my memory serves me correctly, when we were testing for PMB11, I think I did a blade one time in 9 strokes.
You had a burr after 2 strokes?
Yeah.
You're just bragging, aren't you?
No. No, it was a freshly ground blade.
Yeah, I'm teasing you.
It was a freshly ground blade, held at the correct angle. And you'll probably get a burr, partial burr after the first stroke. The point I'm making is this. Here's the point. If you're not paying attention to those burrs, and you're turning your 6 strokes or 10 strokes, that doesn't matter, into 26, that's now 20 more additional opportunities to get it wrong. See where I'm going with this?
Oh, yeah.
So the more you hone, instead of being better, you're liable to get worse.
So I exaggerate with 1400? Okay, keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah. So in other words, you increase the risk of inaccuracy. And that's why you understand the role of the burr. Okay. Any questions? Any more questions, I should say?
Right?
Yeah.
What I found is to develop a system, in my experience, develop a system that works for you,
Yeah.
that takes the least amount of time, because you're more likely to sharpen and hone with the least amount of time. Otherwise, it's like, I don't want to go back to the stones. So
Perfect.
it's
Exactly.
important
Exactly.
to minimize the time spent.
Remember what Robbie Kaufman said. He makes money at his workbench. He doesn't make money sharpening tools.
Does it have a video like 30 seconds to sharp or something like that?
Yeah, but it's not, people think he's bragging, but he's not.
Yeah, that's the...
I do it all the time.
Doesn't really enjoy it.
It's not really those who know that he's blowing smoke.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said you use 700, 2,000, 8,000?
Yeah.
Using like 1,000, 4,000, 8,000, is that difference? Like, what do you think about?
Because I'm looking at
grid
the
jumps?
particle size in microns.
Yeah.
And if you look at a 700 Bester, I should have brought it with me.
Yeah, which one's
Bear with me.
I
I may have it.
So kind of 8,000 grit stone, 2 different stones have different micron sizes?
Yes.
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 The particle size, the nominal name of the stone, 4,000, 2,000, 8,000, is a bit like calling a chunk of wood a 2x4. And we know that if we go to Home Depot, it'll be X, and if we go to Rona, it'll be Y, and if we go to Joe's Lumberyard, it'll be Z. It'll be nominally 2x4. In reality, it'll be something different. And that something different may be different depending on what side of the street you're walking down on a given day. Right? I think I may have that. Oh, it's in the back. I looked at this for a while. Yes, here we go. Beautiful. Somewhere in the printed catalog, I don't think it exists online, is this table. So if you have an old catalog, rip this page out and stick it with your sharpening stuff. Okay. The Imanishi 8,000 stone, 1.2 microns. The Sigma 10,000 stone, 1.5 microns. In other words, the particles are bigger. The King 8000 is 2 microns. Bigger again. The Norton 8000 stone is 3 microns. See what I mean? So if you tell me you've got an 8,000 stone, that might be as good, the information is as useless as telling me you've got tires on your car. What size, what tread pattern, winter, summer, radials, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but to some extent, it is irrelevant in the sense that we have a coarse, we have a medium, we have a fine.
Exactly.
You know, and
Exactly.
then we finish it with some green gook, and off you go.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the critical thing. When I learned this, light bulb started flashing. It was like being at a rock concert, right? This is magic information when you're trying to design a system or recommend stones to people, right? And I was picking on the 8,000 group, the fine group, but it applies all over the map here. Okay? So that's why it's important when you're listening to the marketing gobbledygook by certain sharpening media manufacturers, you've got to dig down into the weeds, and that's why I pointed out that the best thing that Shapton can do in terms of particle size is only fractionally, and it's like 0.2 or 0.02 microns finer than the green honing compound that's been around since Adam was a little boy. Okay?
How do you think about the micron jumps then? Like if you're, like, I think you said the Shinichi was 1.2 microns. So if in your system you want to go from 1.2 to your honing compound, how should you think about building that system out? Because I don't have a 700 stone, I have 1,000, you know?
So my stones are the 700, which is where? 17 microns. And then 6.7 microns, so let's say 1/3 ish, and then I go to the 1.2 microns, so another third.
Okay.
But if I skip that middle stone,
Yeah.
I'm not actually committing a huge cardinal sin.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is make more work for myself
Take longer.
at the finer stone.
Yeah.
Okay, it's about efficiency.
That's all it is.
That's really all it is. But you might say, well, in that case, then I could also eliminate my core stone and just do all the work on the 8,000 stone. Okay, bye-bye efficiency.
Sure.
Okay?
So Brian, if we think of microns being from the engineering department and grits being from the marketing department, it would be pretty much in the right ballpark?
Right. Exactly. Precise. That's a great way to look at it. Great way to look at it. Okay. Now we're going to get down to the good stuff. I didn't think the first part would be so lengthy. I thought I'd zoom through it, but you guys had tons of great questions, and it was really good. So, the zone. Okay, now engineers, put your slide rules away. Okay, I know there's a few here. Engineers, I mean. If there's slide rules in the room, it's going to be really scary, but anyway. I kind of created this notion, okay, of trying to describe, or this concept of how to describe what we're doing here. So it doesn't really matter if my sharpening regime takes me into, I don't want a stick. I have to bring one. They're a long.
Would you have a piece of wood?
Help to reach with. So, imagine, if you will, Okay, so I take my sharpening to a super fine level. So if you're, somebody in the room here is only using a medium stone, their graph would look different. I just made this graph look simple, okay? So wherever you are, you're gonna have a peak. So if you're using, you're not using green honing compound, and you're just stopping at the fine, then your graph is gonna look shorter, okay? You're still gonna have a peak. That is to say, this is as good as you can do with that particular level of grit. Are you with me all so far? Okay. So, on the one hand, we have the level of sharpness achieved and the time it takes to get it done. All right? That's the concept here. So the curve is representational. There's no numerical significance. This is not drawn with numbers. The shape of the curve will depend on many factors, blah, blah, blah. Each scenario will have a peak. This scenario being what kind of a woodworker you are, what kind of a sharpener. The peak represents theoretical perfection, that thing we can never achieve. But if we should so happen to land on it someday by accident, it'll be a momentary fleeting thing. First stroke on a piece of wood, it's gone. All right? That's what perfection is. Okay? The graph illustrates a zone. Here's, okay. I got my slides slightly in the wrong order. So what is the zone that I'm talking about? Edges sharp enough for the work at hand. Edge has not been seriously degraded, okay? In other words, it's not down into the level of dullness that where we should have thrown in the towel a while ago. Can be restored with a touch-up. Here's what it looks like. So whatever your peak is, you're going to have a zone. You've been getting better, better, better. Good enough. Right? Does the job I need it to do. May not do the job I need it to do, but it's doing the job you need it to do. That's what counts. You're going to start using it. It's going to start to degrade. It's still okay to a certain point. Okay? So your job is to recognize when you're going down that backside of that slope when it's time to throw in the towel. Okay? So my point is really simple. Where I'd like to see people be is in the zone. Get as close as you can. Evaluate, micro-adjust, do what you can do to make what you do better. Stay there for as long as you can. Then back up and touch up. Don't wait for your tool to get dull. Touch it up when you know you can make it better. See it down here, you want to bring it back up. Does that make sense?
Boy, that's hard to do. I'm on my third dovetail. I've been in the shop for an hour and a half, and I just want to get it done.
Teaching ourselves things, aren't we? All the time.
It's really hard. It's hard to stop.
Yeah. Garrett Hack said to me one time, slow down, you'll be a better woodworker. Every time I cut dovetails, I think of it. I think of him saying that.
I think that's the biggest enemy we have. I just gotta get this done.
Gotta get it done.
Exactly.
Exactly. So we don't stop to touch up the blade. We decide, oh, I'll just take another stroke. I'll just tweak the knob on my plane just a little tiny bit. It won't matter much. Right. Everybody in this room probably knows what happens next.
Yeah, when you tell you.
So each woodworker will have a peak representing whatever perfection is for you, for their chosen sharpening workflow. And you'll have a zone representing good enough for the work at hand. These are things you can only define for yourself and the work you're doing, the tools you're using, the sharpening techniques you use. The object is not to create a perfect edge. Okay? That's the fallacy. Does not have to be dead nuts accurate 90 degrees to the side. The OCD types are just going to have to deal with it. What you want is to create and maintain an edge that's good enough for the work at hand. Because you can achieve that edge that's good enough in 2-3 minutes, right? And you might measure it. It's not 90 degrees. So you're back at it again. Well, an hour will go by, and at the end of that hour, you might be exactly where you started. So please explain to me what you will have accomplished.
It does
You
mean,
will frustrate yourself.
it does mean that every time you do woodworking, you have your sharpening station ready.
Convenient.
I'm sorry?
That's the convenient thing, yes?
Okay. Well, basically, it's the only way to do it. I mean,
Right.
That's what I hear right now.
Right. Well, let's talk about Roger now. He's on his third dovetail. When I'm cutting dovetails, I have my strop right next to me. I move it over from my sharpening station. I have it right there. And every time I pause, I'm touching that, I'm taking a stroke on the strop. That edge never gets anything other than the way I want it to be. I don't let it get dull. If I'm doing dovetails that matter. If I'm banging out something really big and quick, then it doesn't matter. I can use my beater chisels for that matter. But the point I'm making is that if you're trying to do your best work, right? You want to give yourself all of the advantages, and an edge that is not at its peak is totally within your control. You can control for that is the issue, right? There's no excuse for not having a sharp edge. And I think that the trick is, if you're at that point where you're rushing, you're watching the clock, you're anxious or agitated for some reason, stop. Just go do something else. Create the edge, maintain the edge, and know what good enough means. So I call this, I think that to me, this is real world sharpening, okay? Not theoretical sharpening, not internet sharpening, not YouTube sharpening. And over time, with experience sharpening and making edges dull on wood, and if you're paying attention, you will incrementally progress and become a better sharpener. You have to. It does, as somebody said, take time. You're not going to start woodworking on a Monday and be an expert sharpener on Friday. Okay. That's it. There you go. Any more questions?
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hope, for those of you who have heard me speak before, a couple of you have been in my classes, this way of presenting the final bit there is that illustrate what I'm talking about. That's kind of the feedback I'm looking for, right? That zone of...
I like the idea of the zone,
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Solidifies it, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
My takeaway on this is, if you break into a sweat, planing pawning, it's time to sharpen.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good point. That's good. Okay.
But I like the whole attitude of, like, it's like you're trying to do the work. You're not trying to be a sharpener, because a sharpener doesn't get the project completed, whether you're getting paid for it or not. Doesn't make your wife any happier.
No.
Because I did the edge is really sharp, dear. Doesn't,
Yeah.
doesn't
She's not
really
going to
matter.
care. That's right. Except
No.
for my clients don't care. Yes, Wayne?
The engineer in me thinks that if you had something like a little arrow circle in your zone, it would just, because that's what you're actually, like, you don't have a feedback there.
It's like a cycle.
loop.
In the zone you've marked out,
Yeah.
I'm in the zone,
Yeah.
so what you're actually doing is you're circling in that zone.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So what you're saying is we need to be doing this.
Just a couple of little arrows.
Yeah, that's-
Two little circle
I
arrows.
like that. That's
That's a
good.
recycler.
And it's how long you stay in that zone.
Precisely.
That, I don't do any of that. I'm a lazy bugger. And I'll have
The
to-
truth comes
I will
out
now
in these
commit-
in these rooms.
I will commit to doing more like that.
Okay, okay.
Also create a
Yeah.
flow chart,
I
Brian.
have a bit of problem with my low angle block plane on end grain on ambrosia maple right now.
Okay.
Is that common or, because I thought with the low angle block plane, I didn't really need to really reef on it. But like even after a quick sharpening, I just have a 4000 grit as my top grit. I was like really breaking into a sweat doing like the bottom of the dresser.
On Thursday, I used my low angle block plank on some end grain maple and got a polished surface with no sweat.
All right, sharpening, I guess.
So I would ask, is the blade sharp? And see, the words I use here are sharp enough for the work you're doing,
Not sharp enough.
not sharp enough for the work. You are a candidate for a finer stone.
Okay,
That's my humble opinion.
all right,
Which one, now, that's another matter.
yeah.
I guess there's that, there's also what angle are you sharpening it to?
I believe it's 37.5 total, the 12 beds, I think it's 25 degrees.
So 25 plus 12 is 37.
Yeah, so I believe it's a 25 with a 12 bed, so I think it's 25.
Okay. I use 25 degree blades in my low angle block planes. I've got a few, and whatever then the micro bevel is, that gives you something too, another 3 or 4 degrees probably.
Because again, I just got my first set of hand planes, and I hear a lot of like steep angles good for figure,
Yes.
but I don't know if figure and end grain really swim in the same.
No, I think that for end grain you want low angle,
Yeah, okay,
not high angle.
okay, thanks. I'll just get
So the
better.
25 degree blade you're using,
Yeah,
just sharpen it better.
okay, I'll practice.
And the reason it could be because you have a micro bevel, it should be a straight 25.
It is, there's no,
Slicing the micros.
Yeah, there's a point to that. You could try it without a micro bevel. I don't do that myself. Another trick is wet the surface with alcohol.
okay. Interesting. All right, I'll give it a try.
But maple is still maple,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
doesn't take prisoners, you know.
It's a dresser for my parents, so they already kind of, like, there'll probably be a couple dings and imperfections in there, but I mean.
We've all been there.
They won't notice it, only you will just.
Undocumented.
Well, yeah, exactly, because I've been staring at it these
See, it was on the bottom of the dresser?
Yeah.
Nobody will see it.
Yeah.
Hard against the wall.
That's true, I was just,
Nobody will see it.
I guess I could clamp a little splinter in the back there, and probably going into like, no one will ever see this, ever, but.
And the other movers.
Except the movers.
More questions?
Let's take a little break, guys.
Thank you very much.
And we have a couple of show and tells, so don't run away. Sorry.
Before the break, there are some books over here, Free to Good Homes, so have a look at them, take what
Books
you
looking
want.
for a good home.
I would say don't work with beeswing eucalyptus if you can avoid it. It's horrifically chippy. The tips would keep chipping off, and so the veneer I started with got smaller and smaller and smaller.
That's amazing.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Did you do the course at Rosewood?
I did, yeah, a 3-month course there.
Yeah, yeah.
So I finished just last year. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
nice.
Wow.
yeah, so that's it.
Yeah.
But
That's amazing.
yeah, it's just some old cabinet maker buttons kind of thing.
That's awesome.
So you did the laminations on that?
Yeah, we did those ourselves.
On the form?
Putting these, to bend these in the form was very risky. None of mine ended up breaking, but a lot of my co-students there, they would have their lamps just snap. The veneer on the outside especially would just snap because of the tension that it's under. So, but yeah, just a band clamp around a form. And same with the rim here was just a band clamp in the form. And yeah.
Did they ever do any curve bending at Rosewood? Or is that still
Yeah.
solid individual slices or a form?
Yeah, we just did individual slices over a form. He's done some steam bending, but we didn't do anything for our class.
What is curve
Oh,
bend?
curve, oh, when you cut the things in.
Right.
He,
Almost, you cut
Yeah.
almost through.
there was somebody who came back to do a second term there, and he did it, so we got to see that process, but we didn't do it hands-on, so. Yeah, it was neat to see how he did it.
I need more practice, so I did some challenges for me because I'm a very bad woodworker. So the first challenge was to use a piece of wood that was from KJP, a piece of walnut from their short bit. The second challenge that I had was I could only use one power tool, and the rest of the work would be done by hand. And that included whatever I thought I needed to do, but I had to choose just one power tool. And then the third one was, okay, what kind of design am I going to do and why am I going to do it? And so I came up and I said, well, you get all these boxes that we do and we show around the club, and some of them are the wine boxes for wine containers. So I said, well, I'm going to do a little riff off that. It's going to be for a bottle of sake, because I don't want to give the box away, because if I got to find somebody that likes actually sake, and I'll give it to them in the box, but I don't want to give the box away, so this is a good thing to do. And so I said, well, what is kind of Japanesey and all that other stuff, and Andrew, I took a long time ago, I think Wayne took the same course, maybe, I don't think it was the same time, but we did Japanese toolboxes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm gonna do a riff on that. And so that's what I did. I did this is one box that's for the piece of walnut. And it's just simply the same design of a Japanese toolbox. The bottom is only pinned and glued because in the good old days, what they would do is they would just knock it off when they needed to knock it off. And the top is the same design as the Japanese toolbox.
Cool.
So that's what I did. It was just a challenge to do everything by hand. The power tool I used the bandsaw to split the wood.
So you did not use a sander at the end?
Nope.
Nice.
That's plain.
It was
No belt sander.
no belt sander. It was. I used a scraper.
You use a scraper, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because
Yeah.
the only thing I would say about this is I have decided that I'm not going to start not using Rubio Monocourt or Osmos. I hate the finishes because it's dead.
No.
It's really dead. It just did look dead. I could wax
I
it,
love that. You should have used Levos.
whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to shellac and white on poly.
Multiple coats of Danger. Homemade Danger.
Anyways, it was just a project to get me back into the shop to start doing my hand tools. And it wasn't very good, but it.
Finally built the box. I don't know if you can really see it here. Cut a ring, and then I did the flocks on top, which unfortunately seems to be getting worn off, which I didn't expect. But anyway, there's a nice little ring to hold it in place, and then a spot for other things in between. So the wood is maple, and I may have mentioned this a couple of years ago. There was a whole bunch of maple sitting outside of a neighbor's fence in a common walk area. It's called Cunningham Park, and I watched it for a couple of years and it didn't move, and so I went to talk to the guy and said, can I have some of your maple? And he says, okay, sure, take it. And then we went away on posting to South Africa and came back, and maple was still sitting there. It was stickered, but it was out in all the elements covered in snow, so he finally said, take it all. And half of it was spalted or rotted, but still got some out of it. And the other thing it has is little bugs have been crawling in, so every time I go and plane this stuff, I usually pop up a couple bug runs. So I've decided that, what is that Japanese?
Wabi-sabi.
Wabi-sabi,
Yep.
yeah. So
A little
I'm
bit
a
of
great
extra
fan of
character.
wabi-sabi now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If you-
And the old, and there was a little,
If you want to replace your felt, the solution is to scrape it all off,
uh-huh,
get some real felt,
right.
get a vacuum bag.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Vacuum it down, it'll form perfectly with everything inside.
I was wondering, could the flocking be just spot repaired?
Well, the flocking uses an adhesive onto it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You can-
It's kind of hard to
It's
do a
kind of-
spot repair.
It's not very resilient, but the felt is. The
Yeah,
felt is
okay.
probably 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an
But if you
inch.
spot.
It
Yeah.
just needs a good vacuum bag.
In the
Okay.
spot,
There's a company in
The only-
Maine that sells,
The only vacuum bags I have right now are those things where you pack your clothes in and then you put the vacuum cleaner to it. I haven't used it, I don't know if that would work or not.
I got it from Vacuum Veneering in Maine,
Yeah,
20 years ago.
uh-huh.
Comes with a 1/25 horsepower pump. It goes blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Didn't they used to sell here the one with a hand pump?
We've got a couple of images from Bob.
Oh, I never met with Bob.
Bob Testa.
Hey, guys. Bob Testa.
So Bob Testa sent us two images. So this photo one, he calls it a math-inspired minimal surface, turned and carved. The wood, the sculpture, is Osage orange. The spindle is yellow heart, and the base is walnut. Measures 9 inches wide by 9.5 high and 3 inches deep. 4 coats of Danish oil finished it. Little something for Valentine's here. So photo number 2, this is the second of 2. Valentine's flowers. The wood is for the vase, it's maple. The flowers are maple, walnut, and bubinga. Purple heart, cherry, tulip wood, that's appropriate, and rosewood, naturally. 11 inches wide, 12 inches tall, 10 inches deep. It's finished with mineral oil and beeswax and buffed with the Beal buffing system. So there it is. So that's from Bob Testa. Now, What is stocks wood as well, is it? The venture goes